Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this session where we'll talk about planning an accessible journey and specifically looking at the information available via the Traveline Scotland website and app. My name is Emma Scott. I am the Operations Manager at Disability Equality Scotland, and I'm joined today by my colleagues James, Ian and Ali, who'll be helping to facilitate today's session. Let me just start by explaining a little bit about how today's session will run and how you can interact with us. This session is a little different to ones we've done before. So today we're in a meeting format, and that means that you have the choice to have your camera either on or off, as well as your microphone. Can I ask though that everybody keeps themselves on mute at the moment, just until you're invited to speak. This does help cut down on any background noise and also any distractions. Now you can also choose to have your camera on or off, but can I ask that if you are speaking, please do have your camera on, as this helps us in terms of inclusive communication. We do have some BSL users and lip readers with us today, so being able to see the speakers can help. But also when we move into our small discussion groups later on, it is useful to have your camera on so it's easier to interact as part of the discussion if you feel comfortable. I'll soon hand over to our panellists who will give a short introduction to journey planning and to the Traveline website. We're joined today by Paul Cassidy, by Andrew Much and Juliet Bell from Transport Scotland, and we have Stuart Mcneil from Traveline with us today. Thank you guys for coming. Just a reminder today that at any time, if you have any questions, you can type those into the Q&A box in the bottom control panel. And as time allows, the presenters will address as many of these questions as they can at the session at the end. If you prefer, you can ask a panellist a question directly, and to do that, just type into the Q&A box and we can select you to speak, and at which point you'll have to unmute yourself so that we can hear you. If you're having any technical difficulties at any time using Zoom, pop a little note into the chat function and Ali will do his best to resolve that for you. As I mentioned, we have BSL interpreters with us today, and we also have live captioning provided. There will be a link for that popped into the chat box, or you can use the bottom control panel. It'll take you to a separate website and you can adjust all the accessibility features there. Now we are recording today's webinar and we'll share the link with those who can't make it, as well as on our own social media. If you don't want to be recorded, then please do just keep your camera off. And as usual, after this event, we will be sharing a short evaluation survey. So please do take the time to give us your feedback, as it helps us to plan for our future webinars. But can I just check, can everyone hear me okay? And we're all happy to carry on? Great. So just briefly, I'll set today in context. So Disability Equality Scotland have been working with Transport Scotland for some time now to deliver the outcomes from the Accessible Travel Framework, which is the government's 10-year plan to improve public transport for disabled people. Now, journey planning has always been a key consideration as we try to ensure that disabled people can make successful door-to-door journeys more often. And that includes having information in a format that meets people's needs to help them plan a journey whenever and however they want. So in advance of this meeting today, we asked our members about their own experiences of planning an accessible journey, and specifically about using the Traveline website. So we heard that 88% of respondents told us that they didn't think there was enough information available in general, and that they needed more information and resources to plan a journey. We also heard that 96% told us that Traveline could improve the information that it has that would help people to plan those journeys. So this was really useful feedback and helps us to build for our discussion today. So to kick off, we've got some short presentations first of all from Transport Scotland, and then we'll hear from Traveline. And then later today, we'll have the opportunity for breakout groups for discussions and all questions at the end. So I'll just hand over first of all to Juliet Bell. Juliet is the Smart Programme Manager for Transport Scotland, and she will start off our session. Juliet.
Hello, I'm just checking everybody can hear me. Can you hear me okay? Yeah, okay, good news. Sorry, I've had a few computer issues, so I'm glad I'm here. As Emma has said, I am Juliet Bell. I work in the Smart and Integrated Ticketing team at Transport Scotland. So I'm delighted to be here today at your webinar, and thank you all for your participation and time to support us growing our knowledge around this topic, which is around journey planning information services from your perspective. To help set the scene a little bit and explain what we aim to achieve today, I and my team, Paul and Andrew, have been working with Transport Scotland, at Transport Scotland, have been working closely with Traveline Scotland to understand the future requirements for Scotland's travel data information services. This means the Traveline Scotland website and app, but also the data that sits behind these services. We need to understand what travel information is available to us, how we can get it, and how we can best present it, putting it into use for you on the Traveline Scotland website and app, as well as to provide it to others for use, such as Google or other travel information providers, to improve the quality of information currently available, and also how it is available, so that you have more confidence to travel on the public transport networks across Scotland. What that means for you is that we're aiming to provide better travel accessibility information, where possible, to help you better plan your journey, whether using traditional modes of transport, like bus, rail, tram, etc., or non-traditional modes of travel, like demand responsive transport, community transport, or the more modern active e-bikes or e-scooter services that are coming. We're also looking at how best to inform people regarding transport disruptions, and if people want new or different services, such as personalised fares information or opportunities to pay for your journey online. By making these improvements and building on the journey planning services already offered, we hope to make your travel planning and journey experience as seamless as possible. I have to be clear, however, that we're only as good as the information that is available. This means that the data itself always needs to be correct, kept up to date, and of a standard that everybody understands and uses. So if you know of good sources of data that you think we should be including in our system, this is also a chance to let us know about it. To achieve our goal to provide quality journey information, we need your input to ensure that your requirements have been acknowledged and understood. So thank you to everyone who fed back into the poll Emma's highlighted there with Disability Equality Scotland earlier in the month. I've had a look and I can see that you think there's still plenty to be done to make the journey planning better, from the actual data around the infrastructure, accessibility, through to improvements on the website and app interface, and consideration for being able to add extra time between connecting journeys, for example. With that in mind, we've suggested some useful discussion points based on what you've told us, and we hope this will initiate some very useful conversations during the breakout sessions. Before I pass you on to Stuart Mcneil from Traveline Scotland, who'll provide an overview regarding the services provided by them, just to highlight that we're still in the discovery phase of the project, and all feedback received today will be logged and considered as part of our intelligence gathering exercise. This will then help us inform the requirements for our future systems and services. Please do also bear in mind that whilst today's focus is on the customer user experience of journey planning, that some of the issues may not be so much on the customer interface, that is Traveline Scotland's website and app, but on what data is actually available. We understand that not all data or information we want to provide or that you need is actually of a usable and standardized format just now. And as such, we're really pleased to have our accessibility policy colleagues here today to listen and understand to these issues too, to help build up your strategy on what data you need and who is responsible for the standards and upkeep of that data. So this is obviously a fantastic opportunity for us to learn how we can improve the quality of the travel and accessibility information currently available. And I look forward to hearing what you're going to tell me soon. But for now, I'll pass you back to Emma and then on to Stuart, I think, to provide more detail on Traveline. Thanks very much, guys.
Thanks, Juliet. That's great. Yes, I'd like to just introduce Stuart Mcneil from Traveline. I think Stuart has a presentation he'll share with us now. Thanks, Stuart. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Emma, and thanks for the opportunity to join the meeting and speak before the discussion today. Unfortunately, I'm getting a message which says screen sharing is disabled. Someone could perhaps help me with that. That'd be great. Thank you. I'm going to share some links just now, but I will be talking through them in full, so it doesn't really matter whether you can see my screen or the slides or not. And hopefully they're now on the screen and you can see those at full screen. Thank you. So my name's Stuart Mcneil. I'm from Traveline Scotland and we're a public transport information service. Hopefully some of you or many of you have used our service in the past. I'm going to begin by talking about our service as it is today and how we provide information about public transport. But the main focus or the main interest from me today is hearing about what you'd like us to do in the future. And that's actually really soon in the future, in the coming months, and as we develop our service and completely redesign our website and mobile app. But starting at the beginning, we're a public transport information service. We provide journey planning, which allows you to travel or plan journeys by public transport between any two places in Scotland. And we provide timetables for a variety of different public transport modes. This means, in practice, we provide information on buses, coaches, trains, ferries, the Edinburgh tram, and Glasgow subway. You can access this information in three main ways. The first is through our call centre, which is open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Although it's a virtual call centre at the moment, everyone's based at home. Through our mobile applications, our smartphone apps on Android and Apple, iPhone, and iPad. And through our website at travelinescotland.com. The information we provide is, as I said, journey planning and timetables. And there are there's slight differences there between those. So journey planning means you know where you are, or you know where your starting point is, and you know where you want to go. And hopefully our journey planning system will then provide you with all the information that you need to make that journey. All you need to input or enter is where you want to go, where you are, and the day and time you want to travel. So it really, it means it's aimed at all users that don't have a lot of background information about which companies operate which buses or trains in which parts of the country. It should be very easy to use for all of our users.
Stuart, I'm sorry, can I interrupt you just very quickly? There's a few messages coming through the chat saying that your sound is dipping in and out. I wonder if you could maybe either turn your volume up or sit a bit closer to your mic.
My mic's on my...
Okay. Sorry, everyone. We'll try and get sound, but we will share the slides afterwards so everyone else still gets to see. But sorry, Stuart, carry on. I've interrupted your flow.
That's okay. I will take a look. I'll speak a bit louder as well, maybe, and that might help. Apologies, we usually use Microsoft Teams, so hopefully everyone can hear me. The second part of our service is around timetable information. So this is what people might recognize as a more traditional timetable, a list of stopping places, a list of stopping times. Most people choose to use our journey planner, but some people like to still obtain information in a timetable format, and we offer those for every public transport service in Scotland. We also offer next departure times, which is another slightly different feature. But this is for when you, on the day of travel, it provides you with countdown information about the stop or the station you're at. It gives you the guarantee that the vehicle, the bus or the train is coming, and it tells you how many minutes that vehicle will come. And it provides extra reassurance to those travelling that the public transport is running that day and it's on its way. It's very instant, it's for the day of travel. We also provide information about disruption and roadworks that affect public transport. This could be stations that are closing or stops that are shut. We know this is obviously will be a very bad experience for someone if a stop there or station is closed and they need to travel to another one to start their journey. So it's really important that we display that information. We have fares and ticket information for most operators, but not all of them. And we want to improve this, so we provide more fares information for all the different types of public transport. Where we can't help directly or we get a detailed inquiry about public transport, we will provide contact details so that people can contact the company directly. This might be Lothian Buses, First, Stagecoach, ScotRail, Calmac Ferries, and others. We also have a series of other information pages on our website that provides information on a range of related topics, such as tourism or places to go, and some information about accessibility, although we're obviously keen to improve this. So I'll talk very briefly about our call centre service, although that's not the main part of the discussion today, but I just wanted to highlight it to members and those on the call today. Our call centre has been operating for 20 years. Our agents are familiar with text relay and the Contact Scotland DSL services and are fully familiar and willing to accept those calls at any time of day or night. And we don't have any targets in our call centre to reduce the length of calls. We want to take our calls as much time as they need, but not drag them out. And we want to ensure that everyone gets the information and is comfortable with the information they need. We want to refer our users to agencies or other transport operators where that's appropriate. And as I said, we're open 24 hours a day. On our website and mobile applications, we want to check that these meet technical standards and do so regularly. We are going to be redesigning both of these completely, and that's where your feedback and comments will really help us. We also want to hear from users of VoiceOver and TalkBack on the two iOS and Android platforms. If you're familiar with these, we'd really appreciate the feedback. And we want to follow best practice as we develop our app and website. We also have a review in progress for our mobile apps in particular, as we know ours are quite old now and want to completely redesign them. The last part I want to talk about is, as an information service, we provide information on the accessibility of information. We don't have control over the accessibility of the transport, but we can provide information about that where we have it. So this generally means information about vehicles, stops, and stations. We can show users where the vehicles or stops have wheelchair access, step-free access, waiting areas, where staff assistance is available, and the availability of toilets and parking, and more. However, accurate and up-to-date information is really hard for us to obtain. We want to work with local authorities and transport operators to get more of this information and ensure that we can keep it up to date and everyone can find it all in one place, ideally on our website or mobile app. So that's what we offer at the moment, and we're keen to hear more of your feedback. We want to ensure that our service meets everyone's needs. And we are also working with Sestran on the development of a dedicated official assistance app, which I know that they're very keen to promote in the future. As I say, we're keen to improve the information about public transport services, stops and stations. Thank you very much. And I'm really sorry if some people can't hear me.
Thanks, Stuart. Sorry about that. I know that we've had a few technical difficulties there, but we will be able to share your slides, and we will have a transcript of today as well that we can share afterwards. But I think we all share your concerns or the difficulties about trying to have up-to-date and accurate information, which is something that I'm sure we'll pick up on in our discussion groups. We will have the opportunity now to move into some small discussion groups so that we can hear from you about your own experiences of planning accessible journeys, about the types of information that you need, and maybe some of the websites you've used before, what works for you, and maybe what you think could be improved upon in terms of what you've seen already from Traveline. I know that there was a few things came out of our weekly poll that we would like to hear a little bit more about. So we're going to move into our small discussion groups. We have about 30 minutes set aside for this session. Each group will have a facilitator who will also take notes, and we've got some key questions that we would like to get through today. At 2:30, we have worked in a little short comfort break. So what we'll do is we'll get through our discussion groups, have a short break, and then reconvene maybe about 25 to 20 to 3, and we'll hear from you again about some of the discussions that you've had this afternoon. But please do take this opportunity to share your own experiences of journey planning, and I think the guys from Traveline and Transport Scotland are very keen to hear about the different ways that they can do things differently and to build on that. So take the opportunity to have your say. So I think by the magic of Zoom, Ali will wake us all into our discussion groups, and we will see you back here again in around half an hour or so. Great, welcome back everyone. Hope you all had the chance to get a quick cup of tea or something after that discussion. Hopefully you'll find that really useful. What I'd like to do is to come round each of the facilitators and just get some feedback from each of the discussions, and then we'll have the opportunity to pose some questions to our panellists. So Anne-Marie, you're on my screen. Can I come to you first of all, if that's all right? Can you tell us a little bit about what happened in your group?
Yeah, no bother at all. Thanks to everybody in our group. We talked about some specific things to do with the Traveline, but also some things that we thought were maybe out with the remit of the Traveline, but still really important. And one of those was around the bus companies and travel services themselves being the best that they can. So you have the information to make your journey, to plan your journey, but hopefully then you come across staff who are well trained, helpful, and make that journey really accessible for you. Another point that we picked up on is it's great to have Traveline and to be able to plan your journey, but one of the things I think people with disabilities experience that others don't is a lack of spontaneity. It's not just turning up whenever you want to and going where you want to on the day. And that was made very forcefully, a point made very forcefully by one of our members of our group. It's easy to travel within Edinburgh, but if it's a nice day and you fancy a day out, you can't get on with your power chair unless you've booked that ahead. So more specifically about Traveline, really getting or asking you for more information about your need for assistance. So you've got the information you provide about the time between journeys and getting from maybe train to bus, but also having more their options about what kind of assistance you're going to need. Thinking very much about the buses, how accessible buses are, so that you know when you're booking a journey, that bus is accessible to you. And the experiences we had were principally around power chair users, but I think that would be relevant for everybody. And I think Juliet made a really good point that they're dependent on, Traveline's dependent on bus companies providing that information to them about the actual specifications of the buses there. And one of our participants, Amanda, made a really good point saying what's accessible for one person may not be accessible for another. So we really need, again, that standardization and clarity about that. We also talked, yes, about bus providers being the best that they can be. And we talked about practical things like knowing how many places there are for wheelchairs, sometimes getting on a train and just finding one place, and sometimes it might be filled by a bike. So all these kind of things that are slightly out with Trainline, but still are crucial to the success of your journey and reducing the stress of your journey. I think those were the main points we had there, unless anybody from the group wants to call up and tell me if I've missed anything. We had a couple of specific points, Emma, that I might come back to you about the Thistle card and about a one bus company in particular, that I think we might look at kind of off camera.
Yeah, that's not a problem. Thank you, Anne-Marie. That's really helpful. Andy, can I come to your group next, please?
Indeed. Hello there. Yes, we had a great chat in group one. We also talked about connections and in particular the sort of local knowledge that's really useful to have in order to make those connections successfully. So if you know what you're doing and you know where you're going, then you know when you can wing it. But if you're in an unfamiliar place, you might need a bit of extra information to get you through that connection. We had an interesting chat about the different types of information that we need before and during a journey. So before, you might have a big screen in front of you and time, and you might have a complicated journey plan. But on the move, you might have a small screen or maybe no screen. So how do we kind of square that, I guess, if we're using Traveline? So that en route information is really important, and maybe we need that in sort of bite-sized chunks as we go along and in different formats. And that instant information is so important when things change. And we talked about that a bit. If a platform changes or a bus is cancelled, we often rely upon audio announcements, tannoy announcements, and if you can't hear that, then is the app that you're using, is that updated as quickly as that quick tannoy announcement? Maybe not. So there was a concern that there was a lag between the information that's going out to some of the apps that we use compared to those quick audio announcements. And yet probably the technology is there to push that information out a bit quicker. We also confessed we hadn't used Traveline that much. And we felt we tended to go straight to individual operator sites. There are journey planners within those. And it made an interesting point that we were wondering what the benefit of using Traveline was, but luckily we had Stuart in our group. So we had a little chat around that, and we wondered whether it's not that there isn't a benefit, it's maybe just explaining what the advantages are and what those benefits are that may be a useful thing for Traveline to think about, is, to point out the advantages to people so that it might encourage people to use it more. So that was us. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you, Andy. Hussein, can I hear from your group next, please?
Hi there, Emma. Thank you very much and welcome from Group 3. And I'd also like to thank the members of my group for their feedback. So we took the 4 areas for discussion in turn. There were some very specific feature requests and examples, but also some general issues. These will be expanded upon in the notes. There was specific requests for train platform changes and information about which platform trains are going from, and one of our members said that they specifically use the Trainline website because they provide that information, whereas others, the Traveline doesn't tend to do that. There was a request, just as Focus said before, about real-time updating. There were a desire for better options to maybe replan your journey. So if you're going to arrive at your usual stop when your connection has maybe already left, or your connection has perhaps arrived early, can you get information to be able to change your journey on the fly to ensure that you actually meet your connection and maybe take out some of those very long connection times, or indeed the possibility of a misconnection, especially in the Highlands. There was a wish to know that whether stations are manned or unmanned for those requiring in-person assistance, particularly cogent at the moment, especially because a lot of the staffing at railway stations has been reduced as a result of COVID. We wanted to know whether there was real-time information on buses available, which operators supported, and more importantly, which ones don't, and the possibility for a telephone helpline to get help, not only for planning your journey in advance, but if you're somewhere on the road and you get stuck, just someone to be able to call a help. In terms of assistance, again, there was a lot of talk about trains, knowing where the coaches are on the platform, information to know where to stand. As a bit of a tangent in terms of physical infrastructure, could we maybe consider having tactile markings on the platform so we know where the coaches are going to be? We understand that drivers are trained to know when to stop their trains, but that doesn't always match up with the infrastructure on a station. Moving on to user interfaces, we wanted to have the same equity of access regardless of the platform that one is looking at. And we know at the moment, for example, that Android users are disadvantaged because key mapping services are not available. So there should be user testing across all of these services to ensure that. Pedestrian directions came up. Google was cited as a good example of pedestrian directions that mirror what is actually on the ground. With Traveline, you tend to get a lot of unnamed roads and unnamed turnoffs, and you end up stranded in the middle of nowhere. So that was maybe a suggestion to use the good pedestrian directions that are already out there and source that into Traveline. Also, one issue noted with the current website was that people with learning difficulties tend to find that quite difficult. There was a desire for more pictorial representation of the functions and buttons in addition to just having text. And lastly, moving on to communication, again, real-time planning came up, but also in terms of communicating with disabled people, there was a desire to have more lived experience that Traveline can be made of. So some of the suggestions were mystery shopping, shadowing a person while they're making a journey and using the Traveline service to be absolutely sure of the problems that the person is experiencing and to see it through their eyes or their shoes. Having more disability awareness training, there were some examples cited of programs to ensure that staff are fully cogent and fully versed on the problems that are experienced. And lastly, a lot of the apps and websites rely on physical manipulation to access and control. An interesting suggestion was made as to whether we could have something that could be operated purely by voice for those, and myself included, who find physical dexterity an issue. And last but not least, just to remember that digital solutions are great and we all love them, but sometimes you just don't have signal. So we should always make sure that there is some sort of accessible fallback option. And I'm sure I've forgotten a heap of things and people will call me up on it, but I'll put some more of these in the notes.
Thank you, Hussein. It sounds like your group covered every possible topic in that half an hour, so well done to you guys. James, can I come to you next? How did you get on in your group? Just a couple of points, if that's okay.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks, Emma. And thanks everyone in my group for their contributions. A lot of similar themes were coming up from the other groups, so I'll just run through that. So in terms of journey planning, I think it's looking at having as much up-to-date information as possible in a number of different accessible formats. So I think that kind of comes back to looking at inclusive communication and a recognition that individuals have different communication strengths and preferences. But also when looking at journey planning, it's important to have information on connectivity between different modes of transport. And Andrew from Transport Scotland, who is part of our group, highlighted that this is something that's being looked at and looked to include, the likes of community transport. And just looking at other things, again, this was mentioned before, but information about changing platforms, if that can be integrated with journey planning services, but that also must take into consideration that extra time is required for some people to make a connection due to the nature of their disability. Yeah, and also in terms of information, useful information to have, it was also looking at the location of toilets and cafes and whether that can be integrated with journey planning services in Traveline Scotland. And just finally, on the sort of general looking at journey planning, we also discussed if something does go wrong, it's so important to have different methods to contact somebody for help. And maybe it's about raising awareness of existing help points that are out there. And again, integration with Traveline Scotland. But yeah, when we're looking at technology and existing platforms, what works well, there was a couple of comments from my group about Google Maps and how that's a really important resource for people and whether that could be integrated with Traveline Scotland. And then there was specific comments from the BSL users in my group, Avril and James, looking at creating a specific Traveline BSL app to provide that information in BSL, up-to-date information in BSL, but also integration with the Traveline Scotland homepage and actually having BSL videos on the homepage in terms of like how to navigate the website and various other things like that. Just scrolling down here. Yeah, and then just finally around engagement with disabled people. So I think just our group, there was recognition that it's so important to have ongoing engagement with disabled people, and likewise ongoing engagement with different organisations such as the British Deaf Association. And then just finally, Karen Armstrong from Transport Scotland was in my group and mentioned the Accessible Travel Hub. Now this is a website that we host at Disability Equality Scotland in partnership with Transport Scotland, and it's a website dedicated to accessible travel information and resources. So I was just kind of looking at how we can use the Travel Hub as a platform to share people's experiences, when it comes to journey planning and lots of other different areas.
Great, thank you, James. I won't take too long in terms of feeding back from our group. I think a lot of the points have been covered. I think we were very lucky in that we had people who had different perspectives. We had someone with sensory impairments. We also had a wheelchair user and a carer in our group. And I think we had sort of varying degrees of success of having used Traveline website before. I think what struck me most was the amount of planning and preparation that disabled people have to do before making a journey, including sort of researching from different transport operator websites, but Google Maps has been mentioned already in terms of having a look at the street view, seeing what the gradient looks like, how wide the pavement is. And I think a lot of this has to do with wanting to maintain some sort of independence and not having to rely on passenger assistance, because that can be quite hit and miss. Although there was a suggestion that maybe Traveline should be incorporating some of the passenger assistance information so that it can all be booked at the same time. The suggestions were that disabled people obviously should be involved in any kind of design going forward, and that perhaps the designers would like to see things from the disability perspective, whether that's going out and about trying to undertake a journey with other disabled passengers so that they can find out exactly what's involved. I think we've had a really great discussion today. I'm very conscious of time. If there aren't any pressing questions, please pop them in the chat very quickly. In the meantime, if I could just hand over very quickly to Paul and Andrew, can you guys maybe just explain a little bit about what will happen next once we've collated all of this information for you, and what the plans are for Traveline going forward?
Yeah, thanks Emma. So I think going forward, what we're now going to do, guys, we're going to go away and take a lot of information and pull it together into various user stories. These user stories will help us begin to kind of map out the areas that we think requires most attention in terms of shaping up our scope of work. There'll then be possibly a final round of validation work coming through the Disability Equality Scotland guys and yourselves to almost kind of replay some of the areas that we've identified as key areas of work as part of our workshops going forward. And once we've got that validated, we'll begin to build that into an overall scope of work. And that scope of work will then be taken forward through our various governance channels. Ideally, what we're looking to do is get to a point in time, certainly midway through the year, where we can begin to finalise our scope of work and get it into a place where we can begin to go out to the market. But that is still very much a very rough estimate and a draft timeline. We need to obviously get that confirmed as we get to a point of confirming what our scope will be. But as I say, over the course of the next month or so, that's what we're going to be doing, is taking your feedback and getting it revalidated and baselined.
That's lovely. Thank you, Paul. I think we've just got time really to say thank you to everybody today for your time and your contributions. I hope you all found that to be an interesting discussion. The facilitators will collate all of the information you've given us today, and we will feed that back to Transport Scotland and to Traveline. We'll also put together a short summary report that we can share with you all after today's event. We'll also share the slides so that you can see what we discussed, and the recording will be available also if you'd like to rewatch it. We will be sending out a short survey, so please again do take the time to feedback, and hopefully we will see you again at the next webinar event soon. But thank you again everybody for your time, and we'll talk soon. Thanks now, bye bye.
Thank you.
Thanks everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks folks, keep safe.